6:48 coming up towards 6:49 in Trinidad and Tobago on this Friday morning. Well, let's shift from the politics, shall we, to Clico, because an investigation is needed in the bailout plan for Clico from 2010 to the present time by the Ministry of Finance. Another investigation? Well, that's according to the chairman of the Clico Policyholders Group, Peter Pamel. It's all the results out of a published report that claimed an actuary who works in Toronto, Canada, took certain actions which may have resulted in 15,000 executive flexible premium annuity policyholders being defrauded of their contractual entitlements which are due from Clico. If this is true, who should be held accountable? Clico recorded a 2.55 billion after-tax profit for 2018, the 2018 financial year, raising the prospect that the central bank's Section 44D control of the insurer could be coming to an end. Clico's profitability in 2018 was 22.6% better than the 2.08 billion in after-tax profit that the company earned in 2017. Well, if you are confused by all these numbers and all these different perspectives and trying to understand what the hell is really going on with Clico, with the entire matter related to it, is this ever going to be resolved? Well, we have Mr. Pamel here with us to try to break this down in a manner that we could hopefully all understand. Mr. Pamel, thanks very much for joining us once again. You have your tablet as well to try to give us all this information. And I know you asked me before the start of the interview if I had a chance to look at the report in relation to the Toronto actuary. And as I told you, and at the risk of sounding irresponsible as an interviewer, this thing is too confusing for me to understand. So that's why you are here to try to make sense of this.
Well, first of all, let me say a pleasant Friday morning to you, Fazir, and all your viewers, and in particular the thousands and thousands of Clico policyholders that I'm sure are locked on and listening to us this morning. Let me also say that I hope you all had a very enjoyable and reflective emancipation. And as you know, the Clico policyholders, we have been trying to emancipate ourselves from this Clico issue for just under 10 years now.
The whole nation has been waiting for the emancipation from this.
Yes, but as you rightfully said, the saga goes on. It's an ongoing saga. And within recent times, you pointed to one of them. There are two significant developments that have taken place. And that is the question of the $2.55 billion profit, after-tax profit, that Clico made recently based on their published audited financial statements for the financial year ended December 31st, 2018. And in fact, the net assets of the company is about $2.67 billion. So it's not only is Clico solvent, Clico is also extremely profitable. So that this whole notion that Clico, was a Ponzi scheme and they needed to wind it up and all of that, that has been debunked. We have been vindicated as far as we are concerned, because we have said from day one that the assets of Clico would have depreciated because of the financial meltdown in 2008 coming forward. And now those assets have appreciated in value. The company, they generate significant cash flows and they contribute to the profitability of the company. So that Clico is operating as a going concern as we speak. And I think the auditors are now accounting for it as a going concern. I would love to just go into that in much more detail.
But time wouldn't allow us to go into all the so let's take it step by step in relation to this latest bit of information.
So that is one significant development, and it ties into the other significant development, because the other significant development has to do with a report that was published on the Canadian Institute of Actuaries website, which identifies the external actuary for Clico, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Paul Nagai, as having pleaded guilty to several serious allegations of professional misconduct as it relates to Clico. And therefore, that issue has now attracted our attention.
And where was that prosecuted? In Canada?
Right. Well, it's not. Let's be clear. This is a professional body. This is a body of his peers. Right. Just like you have the ICAT, which would be the professional body for the Institute of Chartered Accountants.
Yeah.
This is the Canadian Institute of actuaries. So it's a professional body. It's not a prosecutorial body like the police or one of those entities. And therefore, what they did, they conducted their own investigation based on a complaint that apparently was made to them relative to this particular actuary. And based on the investigation, the findings of that complaint, which I can touch on if you like,
sure.
He has actually pleaded guilty to everything that all the allegations that have been made against him. And at the end of the day, what he got for that was a reprimand. He has to go to a workshop, and that's about it. So it's a slap on the wrist. But it's important for me to probably identify some of those allegations.
Please, yeah. Right. I should mention to our viewers that we'll be continuing this interview after the news at the top of the hour, but we just want to try as best as we can to give you a clearer understanding of where we are with this latest development. Go ahead.
Right, so this report was posted on the website on the 29th of July, which was Monday gone there. Yeah. So it's hot off the press. And one of the things it said is that on or about the 27th of July 2016, a complaint was received by the Canadian Institute of Actuaries against Mr. Nagai. And this is interesting. It says summarily, so they're summarizing the complaint because it probably was a lengthy complaint. Summarily, the complaint alleged that Mr. Nagai has allowed his services to enable the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago to evade the laws governing financial institutions in Trinidad and Tobago and caused grievous damage to policyholders. So that is what the complaint alleged. Arising out of that, the professional body, they set up a committee to look into those allegations, and they said that after its investigation, it reported to the body, which took the decision in September 27th. So the complaint was in 2016, and only in 2018, September 27, 2018, they filed a charge against Mr. Nagai. Yeah. And therefore, what the charges are, basically they're saying that during the 2008 to the 2009 worldwide financial crisis, the categorization of EFP products was changed. So it was changed from an insurance product to an investment product, which was wrong. And what they're saying is that Mr. Nagai did not provide proper guidance on the change of the accounting standards, even if he had no control over what changes were made. He should have given guidance to Clico that that was not the appropriate thing to do. It also says that Mr. Nagai yielded too easily to outside influences or instructions and relied on the management of Clico for a large part of his work. Now that is crazy because you are relying...
Did they identify who those outside influences were?
No, they did not. They did not identify. And that's why we're asking for the investigation, because Mr. Nagai clearly could not have acted on his own. He had to be influenced or instructed, according to what they are saying, by somebody or bodies. And what they're saying is that he relied on the management of Clico for a large part of his work, meaning that he is the one who's supposed to go in there and test the data. That is what the actuary is supposed to do himself. But he's saying, well, Fazil, you give me the information, and all I will do is now analyze that information and come up with a result. So as you know, they all say in GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So if I get bogus information, then I'm obviously going to produce a bogus report. And he did this year after year, particularly since the Clico resolution plan that the central bank came up with in 2015. And let me just go on a little bit. It says the CPC also notes that Mr. Nagai considers his professional liability to be primarily limited to certifying numbers under a resolution plan into which he had no input or provided no insight. The CPC, which is the body, the investigative body of the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, they allege that this approach was irresponsible, as many policyholders are impacted in different ways by the failure of Clico in such a situation. And the CPC expects that the appointed actuary, at the very least, would voice his concern or general approval of the fairness of the thing. Now, let me just get to the crux of the three charges that they
I wanted to get to that before we pause for the news.
So the allegations against him, as according to them, that they are formulated would be, he failed to act with competence and in a matter to fulfill the profession's responsibility to the public and uphold the reputation of the actuarial profession. 2, he failed to perform professional services with skill and care, contrary to Rule 1 of the Rules of Professional Conduct. 3, he engaged in a professional conduct and committed an act that reflects adversely on the actuarial profession. And therefore, what they did is they put to him that we can, instead of putting together a tribunal to do further investigation, they did what we would call in the US a plea bargain. So they told him, well, you can plead guilty And then what we will do is give you a reprimand and we'll tell you to go and attend a workshop, which is what he did.
Yeah.
So all the allegations that have been made against him, as far as we are concerned, are now has been validated by him, because he's the one who's pleading guilty. And just to get to the specific numbers, what he really did for the policyholders to understand, he was understating the policyholders' liabilities in the accounts of Clico. In other words, his job is to determine what are the long-term and short-term policyholders' liabilities. And on the basis of that, they come up with the required assets to match those policyholders' liabilities. What he did, especially in the case of the EFPA, the Executive Flexible Premium Annuity Policyholders, he understated those liabilities. The case in point is in 2014, those liabilities were 22.4 billion TT dollars. And in 2015, when the resolution plan was commenced, those liabilities were only reflected as being $9.2 billion, which meant that what he did is that he actually ignored whatever the liabilities of the policyholders were, and he had to issue a certificate verifying those liabilities, which he did. And therefore, as far as we are concerned, that is a very serious thing, because here you have a professional certifying liabilities that do not reflect the reality of the situation.
We have to pause for the news, but when we come back after the news, as we get into the second hour, I'd like to find out from Mr. Pamel, one, what is the status of those self-same policyholders right now? And two, does he really believe anything will come of another investigation, given the way this whole Clico thing has unfolded for the better part of 10 years now? But let's go to the news, and then we'll return to our dialogue with Mr. Pamel. Trinidad and Tobago, as we move into the second hour of our interviews and morning edition on this Friday morning, and return to our dialogue with Mr. Peter Pamel, the chairman of the Clico Policyholders Group. So, Mr. Pamel, before we go into the issue of the investigation that you are calling for, and whether you believe it will actually achieve anything based on what we've experienced for the better part of 10 years plus, since January 30th, 2009, when the central bank governor at the time had that media conference, to where we are now. But before we get to that, what is the status of your members, the Clico Policyholders Group, in terms of being made whole, to use your phrase, from this entire experience?
Well, the way we see it, with every development that takes place in this regard, it brings us that closer to being made whole. Because remember, the argument was that Clico didn't have any money, it was insolvent. Now we're hearing it has $2.6 billion in net assets. It has declared a profit of $2.55 billion. So that argument has been debunked. The question of not having money to pay the policyholders is a bogus argument. The other issue was that we sold our policies and we're not entitled to anything. That is also bogus. And I'll tell you why that is bogus. And let me just read from the Insurance Act. What it says is that the rights and liabilities under a policy shall not be deemed either at law or in equity to be merged or extinguished by reason only of an assignment of the policy, whether at law or in equity, to the company issued the policy. What that means is that you cannot sell a policy. You can assign a policy to somebody, which is what we did. We assigned our policies to the government, and the government used that as the collateral. Clico used that as the collateral to borrow money in terms of the bailout, to advance money to the policyholders, which they did. What is going on here is that the government is very close to being repaid all its money. I think it's just about $3 billion out of the 20-something billion that they are owed that is now outstanding. And from what I understand, they are very close to having that paid off. The last time the governor came to the public, he said about 14 billion Clico would have already paid back to the government, and there's a balance of about 3 billion that is still outstanding. Now, I'm saying all that to say that once that happens, the question of, as I said, the Clico has the money. Two, those liabilities don't go anywhere. So each policy that the policyholders have right now are accruing liabilities as we speak relative to Clico. And therefore, what we have to do is to meekly wait a moment until the government gets back its money.
But how much longer can you wait? Because in the interim, I'm sure some policyholders, and you've highlighted this before, and debunked this idea as well of this all being about greed. Yes. The EFPA was all about getting more than you deserve and so on. I mean, time is going, and some policyholders might have passed away. Yes. Some policyholders might have been in desperate financial circumstances because of putting not necessarily all the eggs in the one basket, but a significant sum. Are you prepared to wait even even longer?
We're not only prepared to wait, we're prepared to take legal action at the appropriate time. But let me say to you this. One of my members asked me that same question yesterday when they heard I was coming on to your program. And my response was simply this, and I have to thank my deceased mom for giving me this quote. She said, a wise man once said, the race is not for the swiftest, it's for those who endure to the end. And we are prepared to endure to the end to ensure that policyholders get their just due.
But when is the end?
The end is coming near. Don't worry. The end is going to come near. But let me just get back to the issue.
Yeah, sure.
Let me say some of the questions that immediately arise out of all these developments are: one, what is the status of that external actuary, Mr. Paul Nagai? Is he still contracted to do actuarial work for Clico? I think the chairman, the executive chairman of Clico, Ms. Claire Gomez, has to answer that question. And if she doesn't answer it, then the governor of the central bank, Dr. Alvin Hilaire, he has to answer it. And if he doesn't want to answer it, then the Minister of Finance, where the buck stops, Mr. Coleman, but he has to answer the question. We are hearing that he has resigned. So they can either confirm or deny that he has resigned. And if he has not resigned, what action, if any, is going to be taken against him? That's one first question. The second question is, did Mr. Nagai wake up one morning and decide to understate the liabilities of the executive flexible premium annuity policyholders, or was he instructed by someone to do so? And therefore, and if he was, who are those persons or persons who gave those instructions? Bearing in mind that Mr. Nagai knew full well that that was wrong, that was not the correct procedure to be adopted, the policy position to be adopted with respect to those liabilities. And therefore, the effect of that is that in the books or in the accounts of Clico, because remember, the auditors have to rely on the actuary to provide them with a statement,
and by understating
a certificate.
What
Yes,
that means.
by understating it, the accounts will reflect a reduced position, or a position that says that the assets are greater than the liabilities to the extent of the understatement. So in other words, it would appear as if the policyholders are not entitled to any money. Quite apart from the legal position where you cannot sell a policy.
Right.
It is now being buttressed by a position in the statutory fund which says that the liabilities don't exist. So therefore, what claim do you have? So you see all these things tie into one another. That's why we are calling for an investigation. So the investigation will determine whether or not Mr. Nagai, because a new actuary would have to be brought in, a competent and honest actuary, if I may say so, to determine whether the accounting, the actuarial treatment and the accounting treatment for all these things have been done properly. And if they have not, then those things need to be corrected or rectified immediately, which will then indicate what the true liability of Clico is to its policyholders. And I must mention that the actuary has to perform his actuarial functions in accordance with the Insurance Act. He cannot take instructions that are run contrary or ultra vires to the Insurance Act. And that is exactly what he's doing. That is exactly what he admitted to doing. And that was what the professional body found him guilty of. So therefore, there's no way I can see us moving forward here without a proper investigation being done.
And given the realities of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Pamel, look, we had a Clico Commission of Inquiry with Sir Anthony Coleman.
Yes.
It has, we are left in the dark as to where what are the real details of that and what action is being taken. So given the huge and significant expense, the length of time, all the resources that were expended in that direction, and we are yet to see real action, even though I'm sure all the authorities will tell us that we don't know and all that sort of thing. What gives you any confidence that your call for an investigation in this particular matter will gain any traction with the authorities?
Well, as I said, I don't know if it will or it will not, but I think it's obviously the right thing to do. What it will do, though,
when is the right thing done in Trinidad and Tobago in relation to matters like this?
Well, that's a good question for Zee. But the point about it is, what has transpired here in that report of the professional body in Canada, that is going to buttress our efforts, if necessary. If we have to take legal action if necessary, it is going to buttress our efforts, because it is clear that that actuary acted improperly. He acted with total disregard and for the rights and entitlements of the policyholders. But to come back to you just mentioned this commission of inquiry. I must admit, Fazil, this is a real sore point for me, because as you know, I attended the commission of inquiry. I gave evidence. I did all sorts of things during that process. And to date, as you rightfully said, we have not heard anything about that commission of inquiry. The last thing I heard was that the deceased, because he passed away, Sir Anthony Coleman, he passed the report to the president. The president passed it to the prime minister. The prime minister then said he passed it to the DPP. And all of this is supposed to be done so that, and he said he can't make any of it public because he doesn't want to jeopardize any future prosecutions. To date, no one has been charged.
So is this that old talk, Mr. Pomel? The DPP could say what the hell he wants,
yes,
and he could feel offended with people referring to him. And the fact of the matter is, taxpayers' money has been expended, as it always is, with these various commissions of inquiry, and we are left with our hands wringing, wondering what the hell is going on. So in this particular case, that's why I asked you to frame the question in that way. If you could have something to the extent of a commission of inquiry, and they all passing the buck to one another, like if it's a football game, isn't this going to just be an exercise in futility for you to be calling for this investigation?
Well, I always like to be the eternal optimist here.
Based on what, Mr. Pomel?
No, it's just part of my nature. And I know Mr. Imbert, he's a very serious guy. And I think...
Really?
Yeah, I think he is. He's a serious guy. He, at times,
that's the same person who supervised the removal of the dragon from the Red House, you know.
I don't want to go there. But the point is, Fazir, I don't know if he has gotten a copy of the report. It's on the website, incidentally, so any one of your viewers can actually go to the website. It's www.CIA, which is, you can, if you Google it, just Google Canadian Institute of Actuaries.
Okay, CIA.
Yes, CIA, Canadian Institute
Not the American CIA.
No,
the
not that one. It probably
Actuaries.
should have been that one, but
maybe,
not that one.
Maybe they need the CIA to work on this one.
Yeah, but the point is, I'm sure if Mr. Imbert looks at it, or the governor of the central bank, or the executive chairman, Ms. Claire Gomez, looks at it, they obviously are going to come to the same position that I have come to, that this cannot allow to go unchecked. We need to find out exactly what transpired with this actuary. Because incidentally, that actuary has been there since the 1990s, I understand. Yeah. So he has been spanned at least 3 decades now. That is unheard of as far as I'm concerned in the financial world. You don't have one body whose job it is to analyze and your stuff. Therefore, more than between 5 to 7 years. The auditors, there's good, in terms of best practice and good corporate governance. So this guy has been there for the last 3 decades. And he has been writing report after report, signing off on certificate after certificate. And really and truly, we really don't know what he has been doing.
And before time runs out on us, Mr. Pomel, just in relation to this particular issue, never mind the skepticism and whatever,
yes,
what would give you comfort that the government is really interested? Because we're in political season where everything takes a backseat to winning elections. Yeah. What would give you comfort based on this latest bit of information which came out earlier this week, yeah, that the government is really inclined or even serious about dealing with this in a meaningful way?
What gives me comfort is the fact that they have over 15,000 policyholders who are looking on to see what the actions of the government will be in relation to this matter, because they are directly impacted by these things that this actuary would have perpetrated, and whoever else was involved with him in terms of giving instructions and all that kind of thing. And I think to not look into this or not take action, they would be doing so at their own peril. Because as you know, and I'm not a politician, but I understand there's an election coming up.
15,000 policyholders is 15,000 voters. That's the best way to get them to listen.
Absolutely. I remember the last time we told the previous administration that if they ignore the policyholders, which they did, they would do so at their own peril, and we know what the outcome of the last election was. So all I'm saying is, if they can ignore us, no problem. But people are they're not going to take that lightly. Let me put it that way.
Mr. Pomel, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this morning to offer another perspective in the ongoing Clico saga. But as I mentioned many years ago, we've solved the Clico saga from our perspective, because he's right there standing up behind the camera. Dougie, he's the one to blame for all of this. We'll be back right after this.